All right, welcome back. Well, now, this is a follow-up of what social media was awash with it. It was all over the media, how the recommendation from the WTO's panel for Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala for that top job as WTO DG. So, expectedly, there was a lot of hoopla in the country. I think people were jumping the gun with that excitement. All the proliferation of information.
Well,
that,
it sounded like it was a done deal already. WTO recommends. That's what people saw. But recommend just sounded like appointed in people's heads. So
they needed to calm down and read what exactly is the situation.
Well, which is one of those things that is our responsibility in the media. You know, we do our own bit to cast the headlines, but then, as you say, sometimes people read what they want to read. People understand.
That's always the nature of these things.
And that's one thing with communication, but that's why we're here.
Yeah. So to shed light on that, because it's not over yet. Yes, she's scaled a major hurdle in getting that WTO top job, but at the moment it's still some grounds to cover, which is part of what we will be talking about this morning. So we've got Professor Oyebanji Oyelaron Oyeyinka, who is the Senior Special Advisor on Industrialization to the President, AFDB. Good morning, Prof. Good to see you again today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so it appears as though it's deja vu now, because I remember during that of the AFB, it was a similar matter. Everybody thought, what's going on? What's the impediment? Why? Who's that? But now, we're here again now. How did you internalize these things when you saw all these headlines and say, wait a minute, the U.S., they have some concerns about this one now?
Yeah, of course, it's like deja vu. I mean, we've been through this before. Of course, I think people were right, of course, to jump to, rejoicing about Dr. Okonjo-Iweala's recommendation. Ordinarily, when the WTO countries make their voting, she scored 164, and the Koreans score 104. Normally, the DG is chosen by consensus. So without the objection by the U.S., this should have been a done deal. But as you remarked in the beginning, this is one more hurdle to cross. It will now go into further negotiations by the internal process of the WTO. So we still hope she will scale through. We've been through this before with Dr. Adesina's election, the same United States. So this is international politics. It's negotiation, it's all manner of, deal making behind the scene. So we hope, we believe with all the effort Nigeria has made so far, we'll be able to scale this hurdle also.
Well, there are a number of firsts in this one, clearly. It's the first time an African has gotten this far. It's the first time a woman has gotten this far. And it is the first time there is this kind of hesitation that there is no consensus yet. In the event that there is no consensus, what are the options? So,
this hasn't happened in the recent time. I recall that for WTO, the last time this happened was before this new consensual deal-making happened. In that particular instance, what happened was that the two candidates were then asked to serve 3 years each. But once this particular new recommendation had been in place, we haven't had this kind of issue. But if you watch carefully what has happened with WTO, when the Brazilian left in September 1, there were 4 deputy DGs, and one of them ordinarily should have assumed the position of the acting Director General. They couldn't pick anyone. There was a Nigerian, an American, a Chinese, and a German. Up till now, there had been no acting DG. So that was a pointer actually to the difficulties that we see now, that if they couldn't even pick an acting director general, there was problem ahead. But this is the nature of things. As you saw with the Africa Development Bank, we went through all of this. At the end of the day, Dr. Additional still got 100% voting, which had never happened before. The election for the WTO DG started 9 months ago, as is the custom. They go through a very elaborate process. It is a 3-step process whereby countries bring forth their candidates, they are interviewed, and they go through all manner of things. Of course, because of COVID this time around, the candidates were invited to Geneva. They had to do some sort of beauty pageant, selling themselves to different countries before we had this last couple of people emerge. So the two outstanding candidates, of course, Dr. Ewell and the Korean candidate emerged in the last couple of days. But what will happen now will be that on the 9th of November, the board of WTO is going to meet. And I'm sure before then there will be a lot of horse trading and negotiations. And hopefully someone will, this Dr. Wela will still emerge. You have 164 countries voting. She got so many votes. So we believe that with all the big blocs backing her, the European bloc, China, Japan, all the African bloc supporting her, the Caribbeans, the Oceania. So she has very strong support. So we are hopeful.
You know, yes, we'll still dwell on that for a bit, but give us the benefit of hindsight. I mean, for that of the ADB, the circumstances, I mean, some say was kind of different in terms of the issues in consideration at the time, but again, it was the same opposition. So in this case, is there any correlation with the typology of the hurdle? But yes, we know the hurdle itself. So any similarity?
Well, I think there are broadly two things that you could identify. One is the Americans' own internal politics. America has withdrawn mostly from multilateralism. The America First agenda of the current administration actually, of course, is in contradistinction to the multilateral world that we have had since 1945. So that plays a big role in this. I mean, one may not know exactly what another administration will have done, but you can almost guess that this might not be as difficult as we are having now. The second, of course, big issue is China. We know that China is ascending the global scale, is now the second most wealthy country to the United States. The Americans have not hidden their own competitive nature to the rise of China. And of course, the increasingly dominant presence of China in Africa has been a problem for not just America, but even some Europeans also. So we could see this playing a part. I do not know for sure if Dr. Ewela being an African is an issue. Being a woman for us is it's a big achievement. She's breaking a huge ceiling. She'll be the first WTO DG, a woman. She'll be the first African. So this is something that should be celebrated. But like we are seeing, there are, countries have their own agenda. They have their own, issues both within and at the international stage. So this is what we see playing out. This played out actually in our case during the AFDB. And of course, and this is my own view also, many of the big powers see Africa simply from the lens of the supplier of raw materials to the world. And this is something we cannot hide. Look at the numbers. Africa has only 2% of global trade, 80%, 90% dependency on trade with the world, and mostly in raw materials. Look at Africa. 65% of all arable land in the world, gold, diamond, copper, name it, Africa has it. But we are not present. Even in agriculture trade, we contribute only 4% to the whole global GDP, even though everybody's always excited about Africa having so much raw material. So unless you are present in manufacturing, and this is where Asia broke through. Asia broke through precisely in the middle of the 1980s. If you look closely at the historical part of the two regions, we were almost at par. In the 70s, name it, Nigeria has 6 times the per capita income of China in 1980. It may seem very strange to many people now. We're almost at par with South Korea. And then, of course, they broke through because Africans continue to rely on exporting gold and diamond and oil and gas and so forth to others. So they process and they get more money. So this is all part of the game, and many countries, many of the powers still want Africa to remain the fetchers of water and the hewers of wood, just suppliers raw materials. And this is not even hidden. When you look at global trade, when you export raw materials to Europe, for example, it's almost zero tariff. Whenever you want to export semi-processed or processed material, tariffs escalate to a point where it's not even making sense to export. So this is where, in fact, it's very, very important in the next couple of years for Africa to focus on itself. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is an important trade initiative. $3 trillion zone, the biggest zone in the world. 1.3 billion people. Africa has now the opportunity to trade among itself. And by doing that, we can begin to export manufactured goods among each other. Right now, intra-African trade is about 16%. When you compare to Europe, Asia, almost 60% among themselves. So the time has come, actually. And this is one of the issues we hope an African leading WTO is going to take up and push the agenda of the CFTA and ensure that Africa begins more intensive trading among itself. And more importantly, also to diversify its economies from simply exporting raw materials. I think with that new agreement among ourselves, it's going to be far easier to export processed goods, manufactured goods among Africans. It's taking too long. We've made progress. But for me, within the whole WTO global trade discussion, for me, this is the most important. This is the most crucial at this juncture. In 2020, if Africans are not trading among themselves, we're still fragmented. We need to change that as quickly as possible.
Well, Prof, I think that's a very Herculean task that many people would look at it as a very, very heavy job to do now, given how, quote unquote, divisive we are from some of the things that you have said. But then, from the statistics that you have given, we have very, very significant bargaining power. All of these statistics, we have significant bargaining power. Do you see Africa coming together? Given, of course, I mean, a number of people would say that the job of the DG of the WTO is just that it's not as powerful as that and all of that. But given that role, do you see Africa coming together strongly enough, united enough, to be able to trade with the world with significant bargaining power?
Yes. And you know what is going to force them to trade is because, number one, because we are starting very late. we do not have the technological capability to compete with Asia now. I mean, I always mention Asia because it's like, almost like the Asian century we are in now. But among ourselves, we have that leverage. And what is going to push African leaders is what you just saw in Nigeria. The revolt of the young people, the grinding poverty that we are seeing. Let me give you another statistics. In 2030, according to projection, 50% of the poorest of the poor will be in 3 countries in Africa: DRC, Ethiopia, and Nigeria. If we don't solve the problem of expanding the space of opportunity for young people, we are going to escalate the problems for ourselves. And I'm saying this, that the challenges we face is also an opportunity to induce, it's an inducement mechanism, as I said. When you face a challenge as Africa is facing, so much poverty in the midst of plenty. As I mentioned to you earlier, we have huge arable land, we have minerals, we have all of this. But to get rich, you never see a country that is exporting raw materials getting rich. You never get rich. The guy who takes your raw materials and process it and gets something out of it, he gets richer. You export cassava to someone, he makes industrial starch out of it, he makes methanol out of it. You export your gas to someone, he makes methanol out of it. You export your, name it. All of these things that you see around you, just look around you. You export your cotton to someone, they make clothing and garments out of it. But you get very little. At the end of the day, you get very little. So I'm saying that even if you have leaders in Africa who don't want to do anything, they should think of themselves. They should think of their own children, the young people, who are going to give them a lot of trouble in the years to come. If we face what I call a business as usual scenario, we are not going to have peace. And without jobs, with hunger, you can never have peace. They say an angry man, a hungry man is an angry man. So I think that what happened in Nigeria and has been happening in some parts of the world should be a pointer to us that, yes, we should force ourselves to come together. I don't see these things as impossible. We were divided, but we can talk to ourselves. We can advise ourselves to come together for the sake of the future of Africa.
And speaking about that, I mean, we've seen protests akin to the kind of questions that Nigerians are equally asking at this point in time. So it appears as though Africa is watching themselves, networking, young people. It's a global village now. But in terms of, if you've been able to gauge the psyche of Africans, having seen what played out in that of AFDB, the opposition, the hurdle which we eventually overcame, now that of the WTO, she's scaled the major hurdle. Now the next one, maybe when they have the General Assembly in November 9, hopefully she scales through. What is the psyche, the thinking, the mindset of Africans? Is it shifting towards them saying, wait a minute, we can't keep exporting some of these things. We need to pull together as a bloc and ensure that this trade amongst ourselves, and then our young people, we give them the pride of place. Is that happening?
Yes, yes, indeed. I was extremely very proud of African leaders, the role they played during the issues we had at the AFDB. Africa stood together. A number of these things didn't play out in plain view, but they stood together. All these African finance ministers voted as one. They spoke with one voice, including our country leading the charge and others. So I was quite encouraged. And I think the same sort of, and of course, you talk to them individually, they begin to understand. Because you look at what happened there and what's happening now, you ask yourself, Do we have friends outside? So I was, like I said, very, very encouraged with the way the leaders and the finance, ministers of finance actually stood up and spoke with one voice. If there had been division among them, the whole battle would have been lost. So I believe that Africans are beginning to understand. 60 years after independence for many of these countries, and we are still where we are. Like I said earlier, 2% of global trade, even in agriculture trade, it's 4%. Yet we have most of the raw materials. Between Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Nigeria, we have almost 70% of global cocoa beans. But we don't have up to 10% of chocolate. Somebody else is doing it. And you can apply the same thing to almost all the commodities. So I don't want to mention some sensitive examples, but this is really the issue. If you persist in doing the same thing as Einstein said and you expect the different result, then you are stupid. So I know that to answer your question directly, what I saw during our own struggle in Dr. Adesina's re-election convinced me that African leaders are beginning to understand. And I know that what happened in Nigeria, it's a mix of issues, right? There are, the young people who came and organized themselves in a very orderly, peaceful manner. Of course, things took a different turn when, others jumped in and began to destroy things, which is quite unfortunate. I don't think this is what we should be doing, but I believe that a lot of the leaders will be searching their own minds now and asking questions. These numbers that we throw around, they are not numbers, they are people. They are people. When you say 60% of Nigeria's population are young people below the age of 35, that should tell you something. It's both a challenge and an opportunity because young people, among them are where you have the most innovative people. I was watching some of the television clips and I was thinking to myself, can you imagine all of these people? We aggregate all their energy, all the hours spent on the street, just doing something productive, thinking through some formulas of mathematics or doing something that will help the country, doing some ICT or doing, having them in factories somewhere. And that was what was going through my mind, actually. I was thinking, so we can harness the energy of young people. And this is what Asia has leveraged now. We have the opportunity. Africa is the youngest continent right now. So I believe that our leaders are beginning to understand, and I will encourage them to please not look at this, what has happened, as something bad. I think it's a wake-up call for all of us, not just political leaders, leaders across the spectrum, to wake up and really think seriously how we can best utilize the energy, the innovativeness, creativity, and the energy of young people.
Yes, indeed. That's how we live it today. And also good to know that, you think that at the end of the day, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala will scale through.
Yes, indeed. I'm very hopeful. I think Nigeria has done its homework. I believe she has worked very hard. So many people have worked very hard for her election. And with the consensus nature of the WTO system, even in spite of this objection by the United States, at the end of the day, I believe common sense is going to prevail in the same way that we have at the EFDB.
All right, so that's good to know. At the end of the day, the eyes will have it. Well, thank you very much indeed, Professor Oyebanji Oyelaron Oyeyinka, who is a Senior Special Advisor on Infrastructure to the President, AFDB.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, then. We will be back in a moment. Don't go away. All right, welcome back. Now, 1 week after the shootings at Lekki Toll Plaza, the controversy over the incident is still raging This time, the human rights group Amnesty International is calling on the federal government to bring to justice those behind the shooting incident. The rights group, in its second report on the incident, is also saying the government must stop attempts to cover up the incident. In its last report, which details a timeline of events from when the NSAS protest started on October 8, the group says, based on its investigations, the peaceful protest had been peaceful until they were met by excessive use of force by the army and the police. According to Amnesty, things came to a head on October 20 after peaceful protesters were reportedly shot dead when the Nigerian army opened fire on them at the Lekki toll gate. The group says its on-the-ground investigation confirmed that 12 persons were killed at the Alausa and Lekki venues of the protest by the Nigerian army and the police.
Specifically, for Lekki, Amnesty says it is in possession of a video which details the movement of the military from Bonny Camp, passing along Ozumbambadi Way and several foreign embassies and consulates before arriving at the Lekki toll plaza where the shootings occurred. Amnesty says the entire journey lasted 7 minutes and clearly shows the vehicles which appear to be the ones used by the Nigerian military and the police. The army, of course, has broken its silence on the incident at Lekki on October 20, saying that it was invited by the Lagos State government to enforce the curfew and restore order, and at no time did the soldiers shoot protesters. Well, more on this morning. We have the essay to the President of Media and Publicity, Mr. Femi Adesina, joining us to have a conversation. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Well, in the wake of all of this aftermath of the NSAS protests and this latest one from Amnesty International, what's government's position?
Thank you. Good morning. I'll say government's position remains the same. The issue is being investigated. There is a pro-panel set up by the Lagos State government, and until that panel comes up with its report, any other thing will be premature. So, government, particularly federal government, and particularly the presidency, will be the last bus stop. The buck stops at that table. So if the presidency now begins to make comment at this time, it's prejudicial, it is premature.
So the government is not going to simultaneously set up any investigative panel, because, I mean, the governor of Lagos said it himself, he is not in charge of the armed forces. Everybody knows that. So people are actually looking to the federal government to take the lead, as a matter of fact, or play a huge role simultaneously.
Well, it depends on the understanding of the Constitution by those who expect a judicial panel or anything like that from federal government. The truth is that under the Constitution, the federal government cannot set up any judicial panel anywhere except in Abuja. Only state governments can set up judicial panels in their jurisdiction. The federal government cannot.
So it doesn't even matter that some ministers who, of course, work with the federal government paid visits to especially some parts of Lagos, and a number of other governors did, but specifically the fact that ministers paid a visit. Doesn't it matter that at least maybe that should give some reflection of the extent to which things have gone, and some action would be expected from the presidency consequently?
You need to properly situate that visit. At the end of the Federal Executive Council meeting 9 days ago, the president directed all ministers to return to their states. He said constitutionally, the ministers are the ones that represent their states in the cabinet and in the federal government. So they should return to their respective states, engage with the governors and engage with the people so that there can be a better understanding of what is happening in the country. That is the background to that visit you are talking about. It was at the instance of the president and of the federal government.
presidency has taken some action. What are we to expect as a result of that visit?
Yesterday, I can tell you, because there was another Federal Executive Council meeting yesterday, and the president asked for briefs from the ministers who went out. Only 2 had their reports ready as of yesterday, because some others were still in their respective states, still carrying out the assignment. So the president said all of them should turn in their reports through the secretary to the government of the Federation in the incoming week.
And what are we to expect in terms of action as a result of those reports?
Well, it can only be positive. One, it will help us to establish the truth to some things, because there are lots of conjectures, there are lots of colorations, outright falsehood, fake news, and all that. The ministers can come with what is near authentic based on the consultations they are going to make.
Well, one of the questions a number of people have asked over and over again is what will happen should there be an indictment of any soldier in the shootings that is being reported at Lekki? What is the likely consequence? Because some people believe that as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, as you said, the buck stops at the president's table. So if it happens to be proven that indeed there were shootings, which many believe there have been, Amnesty International says there were 12 fatalities, what are the likely consequences?
You are asking me to look into the seeds of time and determine which seed will grow and which will not, which is not possible. We don't begin to surmise on something as crucial and important as that. Rather, we wait until there's a report, and then we'll see what happens. We don't begin to conjecture on something as very, very important as this.
Well, Mr. Adeshino, in 1993, in the wake of the 1993 fracas, you were a practicing journalist along with several others who were expecting some action based on things that they saw, they heard, and they reported. Consequently, they, of course, as a journalist, many conjectures were made, and all of that is in the time of history now, in the space of history now. So I don't think it's out of place for me to expect you to look into that, whatever it is I said I should look at now. So please go ahead.
No. This is an issue that has attracted national and international attention. You dare not handle it with flippancy or levity. You have to ensure that whatever you say is based on fact. There are allegations. Anybody can make allegation. But we need to establish what is the truth. And it is when that truth is established that you can then make comments. Anything you say before the fact is established is just mere conjecture, and it's not good for the process.
Because, I mean, part of the questions on people are asking is, who ordered shootings at that point? Because now videos, several clips have emerged. Yes, we know there are panels being set up to look into those things, but they consistently keep reminding the nation the CNC has a huge role. So if it turns out that people went there and shot, even if they were invited by a subnational leader, can they actually go there and open fire without the CNC signing off? They just say, like, look, this doesn't look good, and yes, we're not trying to preempt what the outcome will be, but looking at the handling of all of this, there will be huge questions on the commander-in-chief, don't you think so?
It will still be preemptive to say anything now. The commander-in-chief will act based on facts and evidences and information garnered from the pro-panels, not allegations, which could be wild, which could be unfounded. The CNC will act based on information that is verified, that is genuine. Then you can expect him to do something.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the things that happened, which they're investigating now. The military got there, shots were fired. Did the president sign off in letting the military join forces with some authorities? But this time, the reports indicate that they were alone at that point. Was it aware that they were going to go to such a place at the time?
Yeah, that wouldn't be my brief, really. You have heard the military authorities speak on it. They are the ones competent to speak on that matter, not me.
No, but yes, the president is the commander-in-chief. So the military cannot unilaterally take any action without the president's clearance, can they?
Yes, and the defense headquarters has addressed this issue. It would just be proper if you will take it up with a defense spokesman, because that's outside my brief, and I'll be pontificating if I say anything on it.
Okay, because I mean, we thought as presidential spokesperson, you will have information on almost anything, that we can always ask.
Yes, I speak on what the president himself is aware of. It's in his custody, and he has made available to us that work with him. I don't speak on what has not been available to the president.
Okay, because, well, I'm a little confused. Is it that he's not aware of what? Of this, or he hasn't made it available to you?
You are setting a trap there, and I won't fall into it.
No, you are preempting me now. Now you're the one preempting me. I'm just asking a question. I'm just asking a question. You said we shouldn't preempt you, so don't do the same thing to us. It's just a question.
No, a president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the country. He is aware of more than you can think, because he has a helicopter view of what is happening in the country. He has security reports, but things must be investigated and verified before he takes certain decisions.
Was he aware that soldiers were going to go to Lekki, going by what you just said now?
The question I've answered is what you have asked in another way. The president is commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He is aware of a lot of things in the country. But whether he's aware of this specifically or not, ask the military authorities.
Okay, well, let's take a look at a few other issues along this line. Well, one of the things that have broken out as a result of this whole thing is these lootings. And I want to believe that you are as concerned. I mean, you... Again, let me refer you to 27 years ago. You saw all that happened at that time. Well, it was the military government, and it was a fight for democracy. There was a lot of fracas at the time, a lot of unrest, a lot of protesting, a lot of rioting as a result of what the government of the day did. And a lot of things happened at that time. Part of it led to the Fourth Republic. Now we are having lootings again. And I'm pretty sure you are as concerned. It speaks to only one thing. Our previous guest said the other time, said a hungry man is an angry man. And it's something that you are also aware of. Would you say, indeed, that it's a true reflection of the people's anger and hunger?
I wouldn't agree completely with that, because criminality is criminality. Will you justify armed robbery because the man was poor? Will you justify armed robbery because the man didn't have money? Just as you can't justify armed robbery because a man was poor and then he took a gun to rob another person, you can also justify the lootings that are going on. It's pure criminality. Mind you, it's not everybody engaged in that looting that is hungry. That is the truth. It is just greed and pure criminality.
Yeah, but Mr. Additional, if, because I mean, time and again, we hear different authorities talk about the plans they're putting in place, the figures they are working with to deal or address the question of poverty. But those images that were in different parts of the country speak volumes. And then the World Poverty Clock, which, yes, the government has a plan to bring 100 million people out of poverty, but can we actually run away from the fact that we have a huge problem on our hands? That, look, all of those people, it's a huge question. So in measuring, isn't that perhaps a yardstick, or perhaps government should look at those and then reflect on all the policies they say they've been executing. Are they achieving the purpose, having seen all of those on the streets?
Yeah, thank you. Criminality will always be criminality, and anarchy or near anarchy promotes criminality. What has happened in the past 2 or 3 weeks or thereabout led to what is happening now. If there was cohesion and tranquility in society, this wouldn't happen. Therefore, it is corollary to the near anarchic situation that came on the country because of the protests. If you didn't have people burning police stations, killing policemen, burning private and public property, you wouldn't have this spate of looting. That means those same people will be in society and they will find ways to eke out a living. But because a situation was created for near anarchy, that is why you have this. So I don't agree that it is all about poverty. Yes, in any country, you will have, at any given time, people who are poor, people who are hungry, and that is one of the reasons why you have government, to ensure that the number of the poor and the hungry reduce progressively. That will happen in every country. But at any given time, the poor and the hungry will be there. And government has a duty to ensure that their number reduces. So this crowd of people that you see going to loot are not necessarily hungry and angry. They are taking advantage of the collapse of law and order that came as a result of protracted protests.
Mr. Additional, if you would back up a little. The protests were peaceful hitherto. The one that you are referring to right now were peaceful hitherto until the introduction of the military and the shootings. It wasn't the protests that gave birth to these things that we're seeing. It was the fact that the military came with a high hand, so to speak. That's the way some people believe it panned out. So it wasn't because of the protests, which many people, perhaps even you as well, have applauded as being peaceful hitherto. But when the military came in and shootings came up, then the people were stoked, so to speak, and then this began to happen. Then all of the, brigandage began and all of that, that we have seen that happened. The anger pretty much got to a head. Do you still want to say that this is not a reflection?
No, you are not quite correct. You are falling for the narrative of Amnesty International. And Amnesty is wrong.
Mr. Adeshino.
Anarchy had broken loose before even Lekki. The prisons in Bini and Oko had been broken open before Lekki. Orile police station had been burned before Lekki. Many policemen had been burned before Lekki. So you can't say that it was Lekki that precipitated all those things. Look at the timelines. Check when those things happened. You will see that they had happened before Lekki. So you are falling for the gambit of Amnesty International. Amnesty International does not have all the facts. They don't run this country. They shouldn't know beyond what they have been told. They shouldn't know beyond what you and I can know as media people and as watchers of developments. Certain things, criminal in nature, had happened before Lekki. So you can't say Lekki precipitated it. It's not quite right.
So is it the government's thinking that amnesty is wrong and they'll approach it from that perspective?
I am not to give you government thinking. Amnesty had always come up with reports that
is it the president's
are unsubstantiated about Nigeria.
What about, is it the president's thinking?
Many times the military had come out to even dispute facts brought forward by Amnesty. Amnesty should do its job, but it is the duty of Nigerian Nigerians to look at the information they have brought to see whether they are justifiable or they are not.
Okay, there's a message that we received, just to bring it in before we close, even though we could follow up on some of the things you've mentioned. the youths, they say they don't know leader, but in the communication that is circulating out there, they say they reject Professor Yemi Osinbajo-led committee to address the national issues raised by NSAS movements and the protests due to what they say, and without prejudice, for they see a lack of sincerity of purpose and desired credibility on the part of the government. They don't want the VP to head any committee. They say they want the president to lead the decisions and the discussions.
Well, I'm not privy to that information yet. I heard it for the first time just now. And if that's a position, I'm sure government will look at it and come out with its response to that. I'm not aware of that report yet.
And part of what they also say, hopefully when you do see that, they are asking for inclusion of former President General Yakubu Gowon. They talk about Abdulsalami Abubakar. They talk about former President Goodluck Jonathan, former President Obasanjo, to be in those committees to discuss and negotiate with them before they then choose their own representatives who will then be on the table to discuss those issues.
Well, I'm sure that those proposals will be considered. But one thing I would like to stress is that the issues we have had in the past 3 weeks will only be settled conclusively through dialogue and negotiation. That was a window they missed. If they opt for that window now, it will just be very good for everybody. Very good for the country, very good for government, very good for government, very good for business, good for everything. Because at the end of the day, street protests can only be disruptive to the lives of everyone.
Mr. Adishino, take a look at this World Poverty Clock. I'm sure you are aware of it. This is what is on now as far as the World Poverty Clock is concerned. And if you look at those figures, that is what it is saying about Nigeria. More than 105 million people already. And government is saying we're going to take 100 million people out of poverty over 10 years. By that time, we're likely to have so many more people, you know, in the poverty bracket. How quickly do you see this happening? Because many people opine that if we are able to reduce the rate of poverty in several states, what we found on the streets, the lootings and all, will be greatly dissipated.
I'd like to say that the World Poverty Clock is a accumulation of 60 years of missed opportunities, 60 years of frittered opportunities, 60 years of stolen wealth, 60 years. And you don't expect that that will be reversed in a year or two. And then taking 100 million out of poverty in 10 years, the Buhari administration has just about 2.5 years to go. So it tells you that it's not going to be the duty of one administration. It is going to be a progressive thing. The administration that comes needs to continue with it before that can be achieved. It's just a program for the country and is in the interest of everyone, government and the people, if that program is continued. But the Buhari administration will do its level best in the time remaining.
Well, we have to thank you very much, Mr. Femi Adesina, essay to the President on media and publicity. Thank you so much for your time and thoughts.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, we're back in a moment to take on one other issue. Please stay with us.
Welcome back. Well, yeah, I hope we've gotten this right now. We're just trying to quickly adjust the setting of, the setup for Chief Dele Momodu, who joins us next as a former presidential candidate and publisher of Ovation Magazine. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us today on the program.
Good morning, and how are you today?
Yeah, we're well. We're doing well. Well, can you say it could be better? But there's always room for improvement, as they say every time with the gate. But yeah, so following up with where we left off in the last segment and having seen how things played out in the country. Well, yes, you had still concerned and speaking up about this matter. So what is your latest thinking now, having seen how where we are, with all the conversations, the communication, the panels that have been set up, steps being taken to move forward? Can you hear me?
Well,
Okay, go ahead,
yes,
please.
I'm hearing you now. Yes,
Go
I
ahead,
can hear
please.
you now. Yeah, yes, I picked a bit. Yes, I picked a bit of your question. Well, you didn't need a prophet or an oracle to know that Nigeria was sitting on a keg of gunpowder. As far back as July 18, 2020, I'd written an article titled, "Is the President Aware This House is Falling?" So I wasn't surprised when, this trouble erupted. But after what we saw in the last 2 weeks or so, I am now convinced that government would have to do more. We may think we've been able to drive the protesters aground, but the level of venom, of violence, of looting that we saw should suggest to us that Nigeria is in big trouble and it will never be business as usual again. That is my opinion. I know that those in government, they don't see what regular people see. I always say the ways of powerful people are not the ways of normal human beings. There is something in power that makes it look like, hey, don't worry, we are helping you, we are doing everything within our power, but it is obvious that we are not doing enough.
Because we did ask Mr. Additional as well, those images in different parts of the country of people raiding warehouses, unfortunately, people's houses as well. But he says, look, it's not everyone that is there that, can be described as being hungry. Some of them, he says, are opportunists, taking advantage of the protest, the situation to perpetrate what we see on the screen, and that cannot be relied upon if they are to make certain judgments. So how do you relate with that comment in light of what you had spoken about previously in your article in earlier this year?
I disagree, unfortunately, with my very dear friend and brother, Mr. Femi Adesina. As I said, those who are in government, they don't see what we see. When Femi was an editor and managing director at the Sun newspapers, I'm sure he would have seen differently. So he's excused. Where they are ensconced within the confines of Aso Rock Villa, where one of his predecessors, Dr. Ruben Abati, had actually written an article about demons, invading the seat of power. So I believe so. I mean, if rodents can invade the president's office, so you can imagine the kind of demons that lurk around the presidency. So, but last night I had the same conversation with someone in government who told me, oh, some of the looters, they look fat. And I said, looking fat is not an indication of being well fed. It could be a medical condition, it could be anything. So for government to say some of them are not poor, you see, poverty is very relative. You can have 1 million naira as a businessman. No, you can have 1 million naira in your account and you are still poor because at that moment you need 5 million naira. People are desperate. The Nigerian government has driven everybody to desperation. Even the issue of corruption that we talk about begins from needs before it graduates to greed. An average Nigerian cannot survive on his normal income. So when you are asked to pay your rent 1 year, 2 years, 3 years in advance, are you going to collect your salaries in advance? So the system is not just about what government is doing or not doing. It's just that the system, the way it is currently configured, cannot make life comfortable for an average Nigerian, no matter how much you earn. So the looters that I saw, why didn't I go out to go and loot? It's because I am able to make ends meet. It is desperation that will drive people to, you can see some people there, it's like they looted in arrears, they looted in advance. You see people, so it became the survivor of the fittest. How much you can carry, how many cartons you can pull. People went into the home of a senator to go and take his motorbikes, which he said he was going to give to his supporters at Christmas, and they went all out inside the place, a gated estate. I am telling you that the level of desperation, my fear now is that now that these people have tasted blood, it is going to get worse. And my prayer is that government will do something, because this has now gone beyond protesters versus government. It is now a matter of the rich versus the poor. I started some palliatives a few months ago. People were asking, what are you doing? Do you want to contest election? I said, no. We must offer hope to Nigerians. Any government that cannot offer hope to its people, there is no way it will not run into this kind of crisis. We must offer hope to our people. They lack hope. They look helpless. They feel helpless. They feel hopeless. That is why these things are happening. You see mothers running. You see stampede. Anybody who is not worried about this, who is not alarmed about this, well, good luck to all of us, because these people don't know the difference. They don't know the difference. They are angry. And when a man is angry, any man who looks successful is a target.
You know, part of what we also saw in our reportage covering all of those as they streamed in to the newsroom is that even in the reports that were eventually aired, the perspectives that some of them had and still have, you know, some of them said, look, that they don't know that they were going there, in their own words, to possess their possession. And some others said, why will government keep our property in there, asking God to forgive them? So the mindset, I don't know what the authorities will do with such information they glean from there, but are you satisfied with the kind of response you've seen, wherever you've seen it, in different parts of government, how they are responding to the needs of the people?
Well, I must commend our security forces for not escalating the situation. They did very well in not shooting and killing more Nigerians, defenseless Nigerians. You know, in the past, they would have rained bullets. I think maybe what happened in Lagos taught us some lessons that, look, it is not every time you have to respond with iron fist. You don't kill flies with sledgehammers and sledgehammers. That's what happens in our country all the time. That anytime government wants to react, any little thing, even a fly, a mosquito flying past, you want to kill it with a sledgehammer. These are Nigerians. They are our citizens. They are people you call upon. They are people you beg profusely to vote for you when you need power. And it is strange that a government led by President Muhammadu Buhari, a man who the poor saw as their savior, as their messiah, is the one now that looks standoffish, that looks like, hey, I don't even have to talk to you. He gave a speech, a presidential broadcast, and there was no reference to what happened in Lagos, except referring to what happened in the palace of the King of Lagos. That, for me, was unfortunate. I wrote about it last Saturday. The president must talk. There are countries where if you lose 10 dogs, not human beings, it will be headline news. But in Nigeria, people die daily. Nobody talks about them. This lack of empathy is what worries me particularly about this government, the lack of empathy. A leader is the father of the nation. I asked last week, where are the first ladies? These are mothers. Let us say men are more brutal. I expect our women to be more sympathetic. I expect them to advise their husbands who are in power today. Power is transferred. One day, whether we like it or not, we shall quit and we shall all go back home. And I see no reason why we cannot show enough empathy, concern for the well-being of our people. That's why you told us that the previous governments were bad and that you are the best solution for Nigeria. So there is no excuse whatsoever for you to now say it's because of the rot of the last 21 years. No. UK, it's like going for an interview at Channels TV. I want to be the general manager of Channels TV. Then you got there, you started giving excuses why you cannot go on air at a particular time. No, they'll fire you. Unfortunately, democracy does not allow us to fire easily because you have to wait every 4 years. No matter how useless the government is, you must wait 4 years. That's what democracy is about. That's what we signed for. And so we will continue to pray that something would happen. I have advised this government consistently, and I'm saying it now again on this huge platform, that the president should do everything within his power to unite Nigeria and Nigerians. It is very important. Any longer, if we don't have roads, if we don't have lights, just bring Nigerians together. I think part of the problem is the existing tension. There is so much tension everywhere. There is division everywhere. Some people feel like third-class citizens in their own country, and this is very unfortunate.
Okay. Well, perhaps that's why a number of people are talking now about what to do to use your words, sack this government and establish a new order, so to speak. Now, a number of people have also said that there have been tremendous benefits from what this end protests has produced. Some believe that it provided an opportunity that needs to be galvanized in the next phase of Nigeria. What do you see going forward? Because a number of people are already, permutating that maybe the youth should organize themselves into a political party or something and then get in there and make all the impact that they can. What do you think?
I've advised the youth who are my friends. I am very close. I feel youthful at 60 myself. And remember, I was once a presidential candidate. If I learned nothing, I learned that all this talk about a third force, a fourth force, they should not dissipate their energy on it. I know they are not going to agree with me, but I pray they will reconsider. It was the same conversation I had with Mr. Donald Duke before he went in for the last election. I told him, don't waste your energy and resources. If you look at the United States of America, Donald Trump, with all his wealth, he didn't say he was going to set up a structure. America allows independent candidacy. He had to hijack the Republican Party. Chief Moshood Abiola did not waste his time saying he was going to go and look. Well, at that time, he didn't even have a choice anyway. He had to penetrate the SDP to the youth. The youth will have to go and negotiate. The youth will have to go and proliferate. They will have to make sure they have sufficient capacity to take on the mafioso, because Nigeria is a mafia country.
So they have to stoop to conquer. All right, we'll go to break, but we'll come back and just ask you just one more thing before we wrap up. And that will be in a moment. Don't go away. Welcome back. It's our concluding moments now. But let me ask you, what do you think about the chances of Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala in the light of this recent perspective of the U.S. saying, well, they may have to veto at the General Assembly?
It's very unfortunate. I don't know why the U.S. is always opposing the Nigerian candidacy. You remember the objection to the second term bid of Dr. Akinwumi Adesina not too long ago at the African Development Bank. But I believe that reason will prevail. I believe that all the other countries will stand up to the bullying from America because the other countries are not under America. I don't know what they have against Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. It's unfortunate. I know that President Donald Trump has a lot of fanatical fans in Nigeria who cannot vote for him, but they see him as the best leader in the world. I disagree with them. That's my personal opinion. So I am hoping that what happened in the case of Dr. Adesina would also happen in the case of Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. She is one of the brightest in the world, not because she's a Nigerian, not because she's an African. She's someone I've admired from afar. If Africa were to be a normal continent, such people will be doing extremely well. There is no reason why she will not be a presidential material in Africa. But unfortunately, that is the situation. I pray that she continues to serve humanity. I pray that America will reconsider its stance on this, because it would be unfortunate if America unilaterally kills our ambition after the whole world has already approved. I'm looking forward to congratulating her as soon as possible.
Okay, well, that's a good note. That's a good place to leave it. So I guess we'll just keep watching and see how things turn out. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us this morning. Chief Dele Momodu, former presidential candidate and publisher of Ovation magazine.
Well, yeah, there's other things. There's just one last one. Your messages on the program today. Dari writes in, Mr. Adesina said the protest created the looting. Then my question is, what created the protest? If Nigeria is being run well, there won't be a protest in the first place. Government should first look at themselves before pointing fingers.
Well, Kingsley says the government shouldn't attempt to cover up that barbaric crime. It was a dark day, and the only thing that can illuminate and pacify the anger is through justice for all victims. Amnesty International won't come up with such conclusions without investigation.
From ONU, Adesina should know that apart from him and his colleagues in the villa, even middle-class Nigerians are hungry. Everyone in the video, including the security agents, is sadly hungry. He needs to get down from his high horse.
Well, we've got, what's this? Mathis Travel? Okay, well, at least he's that's his handle. He says, well, Mr. Adesina has spoken as a true Nigerian, but my question is, if policemen are quick to arrest the looters, why is it difficult for the government to arrest those who are responsible for the Lekki shooting?
And this one from Cardinal says, Femi Adesina had me when he said, you're setting a trap there. Still, the question must be answered. Who ordered Lekki massacre? How can the president not be aware when he has a helicopter view?
Well, Tayo says, I remember registering for my national ID when I was fresh out of university in 2005. I'm 41 years old now, and I'm still waiting for my national ID. He says, oh, it's absolutely disgraceful.
That's from the paper's review. But just to borrow from Adesina's narrative, this is Kemal Sule, says, I beg to also state that if SARS had not over time brutalized the citizens, the end-SARS protests would have not taken place. It is wrong for the SA to try blaming the happenings on the protests. Please.
Okay, so there you go. That's the show today as well. We hope that you keep those comments coming through. Thank you for watching as well. We'll see you tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Please stay safe.
Happy holiday. In case you forget. Forgot the holiday? Come on. Why?